Hey guys, tonight we slip past the lacquered doors of a palace wrapped in midnight, where the air smells faintly of jasmine and the guards, motionless as statues, don't dare breathe too loudly. Somewhere, deep in the hush of silk hallways and candlelit corridors, an emperor prepares for sleep. But for a man who holds the fate of millions, bedtime is never just bedtime. You find yourself barefoot on cool, polished stone floors. The ceiling looms far above you, lost in shadows and carved with swirling dragons that seem to shift when you blink. Torchlight dances on bronze reliefs showing ancient battles, heavenly beasts, and lovers trapped in eternity. It's beautiful, yes, but also unnerving. This is no ordinary bedroom. This is the eye of an empire. And you, lucky sleeper, have just slipped inside. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The imperial bedroom is oddly quiet for a place where lives have been made, unmade, and cataloged in trembling script. You stand beneath a silk canopy the size of a fishing boat sail, embroidered with gold threads so fine they shimmer even in the low light. The curtains surrounding the bed aren't just decoration. They're insulation from the gossip of the marble walls, the watchful eyes of eunuchs, and maybe even the gods. Historians still debate whether certain dynasties, Ming, Ottoman, Mughal, take your pick, truly believed the emperor's bedroom was a sacred space, a microcosm of divine order. But one thing's for sure, it was treated as such. The guards who patrolled its perimeter were forbidden from speaking. Servants entered backward, heads bowed, never daring to make eye contact. Even the candles were designed to burn with minimal scent, because too much smoke, too much noise, could awaken something old and disapproving. The floor beneath your feet is inlaid with jade tiles, said to ward off ill dreams. The walls are covered in whisper-thin rice paper panels, painted with mountains that fade into mist and birds frozen mid-flight. Some scholars think these landscapes served a practical purpose, soothing the emperor before sleep, reminding him of the vastness of his rule and the serenity he must embody. Others think they were simply beautiful distractions, bought by tired men desperate for peace in the only room where no one dared question them. You pause at a lacquered screen near the corner of the room. Behind it lies a bathing chamber, steam curling softly through the carved wooden slats. A towel hangs untouched. Maybe the emperor is late. Maybe he's already here. The room is so full of presence it feels like it's watching you back. You pass a bronze brazier shaped like a lion. Inside, sandalwood coils smolder slowly, releasing curls of fragrant smoke. Not just for ambience. Certain ancient texts describe how incense was chosen to enhance dreams, purge misfortune, or, if things got particularly tense at court, calm the nerves before bed. One peculiar entry from a Tang Dynasty court record claims the emperor refused to sleep without a blend of eaglewood and crushed peony, believing it helped him hear truth in dreams. What does truth even sound like, you wonder? The bed itself? A fortress. Raised on a platform, large enough for 4 people to lie without touching. Yet it's roped off, subtly, by drapes that fall from a domed canopy embroidered with symbols of the cosmos. You brush a hand over the nearest panel, soft as breath, and dyed a shade of indigo so deep it almost looks black. Indigo, by the way, wasn't just a color of royalty, it was a shield. The ancients believed it kept demons at bay, which makes you wonder what exactly they expected to find in the darkness. A thick robe lies folded at the edge of the bed, patterned with cranes and chrysanthemums. Cranes for immortality, chrysanthemums for autumn, the season of reflection. You can't help but imagine the emperor slipping it off before bed, each fold of fabric falling like the worries of the day. You, on the other hand, are starting to feel like you've been walking for miles. Your steps slow, the sounds fade. The room cradles you in its quiet majesty. There's a story, a real one, of an emperor who forbade the construction of clocks within 200 feet of his sleeping quarters. Not because he feared time, but because he didn't want to be reminded of it. "The sky decides when I wake," he supposedly said. You can almost hear the smugness in that line. A light joke, perhaps, from the man who thought he controlled the heavens. But tonight, it's just you and the hush of distant sandals outside, the faint rustle of drapery, and the scent of power asleep. You curl slightly under the imagined canopy, letting your fingers trace invisible lines across the bed's carved edges. Each groove holds history, of laughter, jealousy, negotiations whispered into silks, of passion and protocol tangled in ways that no scroll will ever fully admit. And yet, somehow, even here, you feel safe. As if the centuries lean in close, not to judge you, but to keep you warm. The bed doesn't creak. The floor doesn't groan. And for a few suspended moments, the weight of empires lifts, leaving only breath and quiet velvet air. You blink slowly, letting your eyes drift across the curve of the wall, if you can call it a wall. It's more like a cascade of silk panels stitched together in subtle gradients of gold and bronze, shimmering just slightly in the lantern glow. Somewhere beyond, you hear a faint jingle, small bells, the kind worn on embroidered slippers. You're not alone in here, not exactly. From behind one partition, a figure passes, a eunuch, you realize. Dressed in slate-gray robes, he moves with practiced silence, like someone who's spent years perfecting the art of being invisible. His role is simple yet sacred, to be the gatekeeper to the emperor's most private world. Eunuchs, historically speaking, weren't just servants. In many ancient courts, Chinese, Persian, Byzantine, they were the palace's secret architects. Fixed somewhere between trusted confidant and prison warden, they oversaw the harem, managed sensitive documents, and regulated exactly who crossed the emperor's threshold and when. Their physical condition made them, in theory, impartial, emotionless, loyal only to the throne. Of course, historians still argue whether this neutrality was more myth than fact. Some eunuchs wielded terrifying power, subtly shaping imperial policy from behind paper walls. One infamous example? Wei Zhongxian, a Ming dynasty eunuch who practically ran the empire in the 1620s, decorating temples with his own name and orchestrating purges from the shadows. Not quite the quiet housekeeper most imagine. You pause near a low writing table tucked along the wall. Here, a scroll sits unfurled, ink still glossy in places. A poem? A report? Maybe a dream recorded by a palace scribe. These scribes had their own strange role, part documentarians, part gossips with official titles. Their job was to observe, or at least pretend they weren't, and ensure that everything the emperor did, yes, even in bed, was remembered if not written. Now your attention turns to the layered drawers beneath the table. Each one contains something precious. A silk sash, folded 12 times. A hair comb inlaid with jade and mother of pearl. A sealed letter that smells faintly of rose water. You imagine the emperor's nightly routine involved these small rituals, personal anchors in a world spinning constantly with betrayal, admiration, and responsibility. Of course, the actual moment the emperor entered his bedroom wasn't always majestic. Sometimes, he stumbled in half-drunk from a diplomatic banquet. Other nights, he arrived brooding, red-eyed from days of mourning or weeks of state deliberation. The eunuchs would help him change into sleep robes, lay out the evening's herbal drink, part tonic, part sedative, and clear away any lingering incense that didn't align with tonight's cosmic mood. And yes, sometimes, someone else would be waiting behind the curtains. But not yet. Right now, the focus remains on those silent attendants, the ones who managed chaos by acting like shadows. You picture them pacing gently near the doorframes, listening without listening. A cough in the wrong place could mean reassignment. A whispered joke overheard might lead to an imperial favor or a disappearance. In one particularly odd anecdote from the Abbasid Caliphate, another empire with its own intricate court, eunuchs were trusted not only with bedrooms, but also with royal secrets. One was tasked with memorizing every dream the caliph had and interpreting it using a private, handwritten codebook. Sleep, you begin to understand, wasn't downtime for emperors. It was surveillance wrapped in velvet. A sudden draft brushes your cheek. It carries with it a whisper of camphor and something sharper, maybe cassia bark. You glance up and notice a hidden ventilation panel carved like a phoenix wing. Airflow in the imperial bedroom wasn't just about comfort. Some court physicians believed stale air caused nightmares or, worse, made the emperor vulnerable to spiritual invasion. A bad dream could be seen as a sign of disfavor from the ancestors, of an ill omen, or a political warning in disguise. And who controls the airflow? Who lights the sensors, chooses the dream sense, turns the mattress? That's right, the eunuchs. Invisible fingers shaping imperial sleep. You sit beside a shallow water basin where peony petals float in lazy spirals. The water isn't cold, but cool enough to make your skin prickle when you trail your fingers through it. It was customary in many courts for the emperor to wash before bed, not merely for hygiene, but for spiritual clarity. Some even believed it helped cleanse the aura, a term that probably would have made ancient scribes roll their eyes, but was taken very seriously at the time. At one point, a few centuries back, an emperor became obsessed with the idea that evil spirits entered through his feet while he slept. So, each night, his eunuchs would massage his soles with a blend of camphor oil and powdered silver. Whether it worked or not is beside the point. What matters is this: no emperor, no matter how powerful, truly sleeps alone. Your gaze shifts toward a low wooden stool, placed precisely beside the bed. A fresh scroll rests atop it, perhaps a bedtime story, dictated hours earlier, or a record of omens for the night ahead. Some courts would interpret lightning strikes, the migration of swans, or even the texture of the emperor's yawn to determine policy decisions. Absurd? Maybe. But imagine the pressure of knowing that your bad sleep could start a war. The door creaks softly. You don't turn to look, just listen. Another pair of footsteps enters. More delicate this time, possibly embroidered shoes. But we'll leave that for later. For now, you lie down. Not in the emperor's bed, of course, but nearby, on a mat woven with lotus stems and padded with silk batting. It's cool, grounded. You feel your breath slowing. The candlelight flickers, casting long, deliberate shadows across the floor. The eunuchs murmur outside the door in a dialect you don't understand. And the great bed waits, perfectly still, for the man who dreams not just for himself, but for a kingdom. You wake, if you were ever really asleep, to the soft shush of sliding doors. The room remains dim, bathed in amber lamplight, but the atmosphere has shifted. A hush has thickened the air. It's as if the furniture itself is holding its breath. He's entered. The emperor, whatever dynasty you've landed in tonight, is not always what you'd expect. No booming voice. No thunderous walk. He might be young, surprisingly so, or frail, with joints that click slightly as he kneels to unfasten his slippers. Maybe his face is powdered to ghostly perfection, or maybe it bears the tired lines of a man who's read too many petitions today. Either way, in this room, he is no god, just a man looking for rest or something close to it. You watch as he approaches the long lacquered cabinet by the bed. Here lies one of the night's most curious customs, the bedside register. It's an actual record, kept meticulously, of who was with the emperor each night. Not for salacious reasons, mind you, but for reasons of inheritance, diplomacy, and, oddly, astrology. In some dynasties, the hour of conception was charted against the stars to divine a future heir's fortune. Tonight's entry? You crane your neck subtly to read the brushwork, but it's already been covered. That's where she comes in. Or maybe they. Because this isn't just a bedroom. It's a political theater, a perfume-scented battlefield, and sometimes a surprisingly mundane place to lie down and pretend you're not listening to the emperor's snore. The consorts of the Forbidden City, or of any great imperial court, did not arrive here by chance. Each woman, sometimes girl, selected for the inner palace passed through layers of testing, beauty, lineage, charm, and whether her smile could hold a secret. Tonight, the selected consort is already waiting behind a sheer panel of silk. Her silhouette is still, except for the slight flutter of her fan, more for ritual than temperature. She doesn't speak. That's part of the etiquette. Until addressed, she is like the moon, present, luminous, and completely silent. You probably think she's lucky. Many did. Even today, popular tales romanticize the concubine's role: embroidered robes, jade earrings, whispered laughter behind palace screens. But life in the harem was more chessboard than fairy tale. Status could vanish with a single rumor. One wrong scent, one awkward glance, one failed pregnancy, and you could find yourself reassigned to the linen storeroom, or worse, sent to a nunnery in the hills with no shoes and less dignity. Historians still argue whether some of the more legendary romances, say, Emperor Xuanzong and Yang Guifei, were as passionate as the poems suggest. Did he really delay state matters just to nap beside her? Or was it a convenient way to escape the relentless bureaucracy of Tang court life? You don't ask. You simply observe. The emperor now reclines, propped up on brocade cushions embroidered with cranes and chrysanthemums. A eunuch presents the night's tonic, a warming blend of ginseng, deer antler, and cordyceps fungus, believed to restore yang energy and prevent nightmares. A few rulers added powdered pearl to the mix, because apparently glowing skin was just as important in the 1400s as it is now. And here's the part you didn't expect. The emperor often didn't choose who joined him. The senior eunuchs maintained a rotation schedule based on palace ranks, lunar omens, and, let's be honest, palace politics. Some nights, a favored consort might sneak in with a gift, a song, a new poem, or an oddly shaped fruit imported from Southeast Asia. Other nights, the emperor simply nodded and let the roster dictate his company, like someone flipping through a room service menu and ordering whatever was on special. Tonight, however, he gestures toward the curtain and the woman behind it emerges. She's younger than you thought. Not a teenager, but young enough that the responsibility of the moment clings to her shoulders like too heavy silk. She bows low, not dramatically, just deeply enough to disappear into the floor for a breath. Then she rises. You note the ceremonial robe she wears, known as the kun, 6 layers deep and edged in sky blue. Her hair is pinned with phoenix combs, but no scent lingers in her wake. Why? Because perfume was a tool. The emperor was known to associate specific aromas with moods and memories. Lavender might remind him of grief. Osmanthus, of his mother's garden. So the attendants chose scent combinations with the precision of a chemist or a gambler. She kneels at the edge of the bed, but does not yet sit. That, too, must be granted. You marvel at the choreography of it all, how even affection must pass through layers of permission. There's a moment, almost imperceptible, when the emperor's shoulders sag just a little. Not in defeat, in relief. It's not romantic. It's simply that he no longer needs to pretend he's in control of anything outside this room. Out there, advisors argue over border disputes, scribes miscopy edicts, and northern generals probably just ignored a command. But in here, everything obeys a rhythm, even your breathing. As the candlelight wavers, shadows ripple across the bed canopy, making the figures seem dreamlike, like characters painted onto a scroll come to life. And just then, a distant gong echoes from somewhere deep in the palace. The 5th night watch. Roughly 1:30 a.m. time moves differently in the forbidden bedroom. Softly, carefully, without room for mistakes. And still, somewhere beneath the polished rituals, you can't help but wonder, what does he dream about? You don't sleep exactly. You just float. Because sleep isn't really on the schedule for tonight. There's too much to see. And besides, this room doesn't rest. Not truly. Even when the candle gutters low and the emperor's eyes are closed, the machinery of imperial intimacy keeps humming in quiet, unseen ways. The woman at his side, tonight's chosen consort, adjusts her position with the subtlety of a stage actress performing for a silent audience. There's nothing clumsy or casual about her movements. She's been trained for this. Not in the way you're probably imagining. There were no sultry dance classes or forbidden scrolls of bedroom arts. No, her education was more administrative. From the moment she was selected as a potential palace woman, maybe at age 11, maybe 13, She was instructed in everything from ritual etiquette to proper calligraphy, from poetic phrasing to the precise number of paces to walk behind the emperor in public. Yes, she might have learned music or how to arrange incense in complex patterns, but her core training emphasized restraint, stillness, and smiling at things that weren't funny. Tonight, her job is not to seduce. It's to be present, poised, and unobjectionably pleasant. Imagine being an accessory that breathes, one that cannot speak unless addressed, that must match the mood of the man beside her, whether he wants conversation or silence, tea or, well, anything else. It's often assumed that emperors were ravenous creatures of passion, enjoying nightly indulgence without pause. But in reality, many emperors were downright procedural about the whole thing. Some dynasties kept bedroom logs so detailed, they read like bureaucratic spreadsheets. Who, when, how long, and what outcome was observed. And before you gasp, remember, this wasn't about gossip. It was dynasty survival. Because here's the thing, the forbidden bedroom was more than personal, it was dynastic infrastructure. Heirs were everything. A son meant stability, legacy, the continuation of a cosmic order that stretched back thousands of years. A daughter could mean a powerful marriage alliance, especially if born to a high-ranking consort. So tonight isn't just about rest or companionship. It's about strategy. The moment that candle dims and the emperor turns to the woman at his side, 1,000 future ripples begin. And yet, not every night ends in conception. Or even connection. Some nights, like this one, drift instead into quiet conversation. A low whisper. A question about a song she hummed earlier. A remark about the eunuch's weird walk. A chuckle. Even emperors enjoy the relief of small talk, of not being bowed to, of being, for a few hours, just a man in a robe with too many problems and not enough friends. She listens more than she speaks. Of course she does. She's learned that questions can be dangerous, even from the warmth of a shared bed. But when he mentions a dream, something about falling endlessly into clouds shaped like dragons, she smiles and offers a poem. Not hers, of course. A Tang Dynasty classic, probably something by Bai Ji. Safe. Soft. Meant to soothe, not stir. Historians still argue, you recall vaguely, whether some of these so-called private poems were actually ghostwritten by court scholars. Did she recite it from memory? Or was she coached by her steward in advance, in case she was summoned tonight? Does it matter? The emperor seems pleased. He chuckles lightly. Not too loud. Walls have ears. Even in the forbidden bedroom, discretion is currency. And there's always someone listening. Just beyond the curtain, in a side chamber barely wider than a closet, a senior eunuch waits. He will not sleep tonight. His job is to note whether the emperor was pleased, whether the consort was dismissed early or stayed the full night, whether the blankets needed changing. And yes, even whether relations occurred based on indirect observation. Think of it like being a sommelier for vibes. Eunuchs had immense power here. They arranged the nightly schedule. They decided which consorts were available, which were resting, and which were mysteriously never summoned again. Some emperors, especially the later Ming ones, trusted their eunuchs more than their ministers. After all, a eunuch had no children to pass secrets to, no ambitions beyond the palace. At least in theory. Still, power breeds intrigue. And the forbidden bedroom was the ripe orchard of palace gossip. Did a favored consort bribe a eunuch for extra perfume? Did another sneak in an embroidered letter from her cousin at court? There's a reason stories of forbidden romance, poisoning, and secret children have lasted for centuries. But tonight, all is quiet. The candle burns lower. The silk bedding rustles softly. And somewhere beneath the floor tiles, warm air rises from the palace's hypocaust heating system, an ancient network of tunnels that carried smoke and heat beneath rooms like this, keeping winter nights cozy and bodies slightly flushed. You'd think with all this luxury, sleep would come easily. It doesn't. The consort shifts slightly, perhaps surprised that the emperor's already drifted off. His breathing is steady. One arm is flung loosely over a pillow. For a man who holds an empire between his fingers, He looks remarkably ordinary in sleep, like a boy who once chased birds in a courtyard and never thought about taxes or war. She watches him a moment longer before lying back beside him. The room settles. But you still wonder. If the fate of the dynasty hinges on what happens in this room, why does it all feel so fragile? It's past midnight now, and the palace has exhaled into silence. A hush that feels padded in silk and stitched with secrets settles over the forbidden city. You can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing softly against the sliding doors. Outside, a night breeze schemes across curved roof tiles. Inside, the steady drip of water from a hidden fountain creates a rhythm that keeps your mind barely tethered to the present. You're still here, in the Emperor's bedchamber, observing, but now you're wondering about what happens when morning returns. Because if you think a night like this ends with a lazy stretch and a soft goodbye, think again. The dawn ritual is every bit as choreographed as the evening encounter. The Emperor won't wake up to birdsong and a tray of dumplings. No. First, he is awakened by a soft knock, followed by the discreet entrance of his chief eunuch, the man whose job includes knowing exactly how many hours His Majesty slept, how many breaths he took per minute, and whether he murmured anything suspicious in his dreams. The consort beside him? She rises silently, wraps herself in silk, and vanishes into a separate corridor with the help of 2 palace maids. No eye contact, no chit-chat. She will be bathed, assessed, and escorted back to her quarters before the first court bell tolls. Her fate for the day, even for the week, might depend on how rested the Emperor looked this morning. And then, of course, there's the record. Yes, that record. The Emperor's nightly activities were often logged into official scrolls known as inshing su, or intimacy records. These were not saucy diary entries. They were clinical, formulaic, and maddeningly specific. Think. On the 23rd night of the 8th lunar month, His Majesty summoned Lady Lawn of the 7th rank. She departed at the 2nd watch. That's it. That's the entry. No editorializing. But oh, the drama behind those dry little lines. Historians still argue whether these records were truly accurate or subtly doctored by court officials to reflect what should have happened rather than what did. After all, an emperor who rarely summoned his empress would cause ripples. A sudden favoring of a low-ranking maid could spark scandal. Better to massage the facts a little than let a spreadsheet unravel the political balance. Now you're probably wondering, who got to be part of these nightly rotations? Was there a lineup? A selection process? Absolutely. Welcome to the ancient world's least romantic version of The Bachelor. Each evening, a wooden tray would be presented to the emperor with tokens or name plaques representing eligible consorts. In some courts, these were jade tiles or small lacquered pieces, sometimes inscribed in gold. The emperor would casually or deliberately choose one, handing it back without ceremony. What seems like a whimsical act of preference was, in fact, a ritual brimming with coded meanings. Choosing someone too often could upset the empress. Neglecting certain ranks could provoke her family, especially if they held power at court. Summoning a woman of childbearing fortune, usually based on horoscopes and menstrual calendars kept by eunuchs, might signal an attempt to produce an heir. Yes, even ovulation was a state affair. There were even rumors in later dynasties of eunuchs pre-warming the selected woman's bed linens with their own body heat, something that seems impossibly awkward, yet entirely on brand for a palace so obsessed with control and comfort. Once selected, the woman would be escorted to the emperor's chambers, not dressed, but often wrapped in a single quilt, like a sleepy, anxious dumpling. This wasn't for titillation. It was protocol. She was expected to arrive freshly bathed, hair still damp, nails trimmed, mouth rinsed with aromatic herbs. The quilt symbolized both modesty and availability, a practice that later foreign visitors to China found bafflingly charming and a little eerie. And then the act itself, or the non-act. You might be imagining lavish passion, embroidered bed hangings billowing in the candlelight. But more often than not, the scene was formal, silent, and brief. The emperor wasn't here for emotional fireworks. He was managing a dynasty's most intimate supply chain. Love didn't live in this room. Obligation did. Still, now and then the unexpected happened. Whispers in corridors tell of one consort who burst into tears during the emperor's approach, not out of fear, but because he reminded her of her father. Another fainted outright, whether from nerves or tight corseting, no one knows. One bold woman, possibly drunk from too much plum wine, allegedly asked the emperor to leave his crown on. He declined. You don't see these moments in the scrolls, but they linger like a strange perfume that once filled the air. And occasionally feelings did take root. Against protocol. Against reason. There was one emperor in the Qing dynasty, names withheld to protect the dreamy, who became so enamored with a low-ranking concubine that he ignored his empress entirely for over 2 months. This triggered such a political stir that court officials staged an intervention disguised as a health consultation. The message? Diversify your affections, or destabilize the realm. Love in this bedroom was dangerous. But even as emotions flickered, the system marched on. Each morning, records were kept. Blankets were changed. Names were shuffled. And every woman, every consort, maid, and attendant was reminded, gently but firmly, that their role was to support the celestial balance of the emperor's body, mind, and lineage. That, and to never, ever fall asleep before he did. The next bell tolls in the courtyard. You glance around. The pillow is still dented. The air still smells of sandalwood and crushed lotus. Somewhere behind the silk screens, a eunuch scratches a note into a scroll with quiet precision. You're still here, still watching, but you start to feel something shift. This room isn't just a place of sleep or seduction. It's a calendar, a ledger, a waiting room for fate. The air in the Forbidden City changes with the hour. By late morning, the hush of the night gives way to the soft murmurs of servants sweeping courtyards, eunuchs rustling robes as they prepare for the day's audiences, and the faint chime of distant bells echoing through the layered halls. But you, still gliding unseen through the palace, are drawn elsewhere, not toward the throne room or council chambers, but back toward the quieter, often overlooked quarters of the imperial women. Because now, you begin to understand. The emperor's bedroom was never just one room. It was the glittering tip of an iceberg. Beneath it, sprawling chambers, pavilions, and entire lives devoted to preparation, waiting, and positioning. And no area reveals this more than the selection quarters, where future consorts are chosen. It's not exactly a spa day. Imagine being 13, maybe 14, plucked from your provincial village or noble family estate, and summoned to the capital to enter the palace. Your family calls it an honor. You call it something else entirely. Your name is added to a roster. Your clothing is inspected. Your body measured. Your teeth checked. Yes, teeth. In some dynasties, the absence of dental decay was considered a mark of virtue. And then there's the face test. Not beauty, mind you. Beauty is subjective. What matters here is symmetry, serenity, and, above all, neutrality. The emperor's chosen must not look too clever, too sad, or too intense. If your eyebrows arch too dramatically, if your smile seems rehearsed, you may be marked unsuitable. Historians still argue whether these assessments were driven more by aesthetic philosophy or rigid social control. Possibly both. It wasn't about love. It was about creating a gallery of porcelain calm in the shape of a harem. If you passed the tests, your life was transformed overnight. A new name, a new rank, new clothes stitched by hand. You were no longer your father's daughter. You were property of the inner court. You'd be assigned to a residence, often shared with other women of similar rank. Think sorority house, but with more poetry, stricter curfews, and a higher chance of dying from emotional repression. And then, the long wait began. You spent your days learning court etiquette, practicing musical instruments you never really liked, and memorizing the 348 official ways to bow. At night, you listened for footsteps that might never come. There were women who waited years, decades even, without ever being summoned to the emperor's bed. And yet they stayed because even maybe being chosen meant prestige for your family and status among your peers. Now, let's take a brief stroll to the Jinfei Pavilion. This elegant, low-roofed structure once housed a particularly legendary group of consorts during the Ming Dynasty. Nicknamed by later scholars as the 12 Petals, they were the emperor's favorites during a famously poetic reign. But don't be fooled. The name evokes a bedtime story, but behind those lacquered doors, things were tense. There are rumors, passed down in whispered scrolls and preserved gossip, that the women there had a silent competition. Who could write the most compelling couplet, embroider the most intricate phoenix, or, bizarrely, arrange pebbles in the most visually calming pattern? It wasn't about impressing the emperor. It was about impressing the eunuchs. Because the eunuchs were the gatekeepers. If you wanted to be noticed, remembered, or bumped slightly higher on the nightly plaque tray, you had to curry favor with the staff. Offer compliments. Share exotic teas. Ask about their family back home. And never, ever underestimate the power of a well-placed smile. But there was also another route to attention: scandal. One infamous consort, known only as Lady May, supposedly faked an illness so convincingly that the emperor summoned her 3 nights in a row, concerned for her weakened spirit. On the 4th night, she simply stood up and performed a dance so riveting, so unreal, that the emperor laughed for the first time in weeks. She was rewarded with gold hairpins and 2 years of near-nightly visits. Was she eventually exiled for disobedience? Yes. But for a moment, she ruled the bedchamber. Not everyone wanted to win, though. Some women feared the summons more than they desired it. The pressure to conceive a son, a strong, astrologically appropriate, politically non-threatening son, could crush even the most poised consort. There were stories of women whispering prayers into their sleeves, hiding herbs under their pillows, or even secretly coordinating with senior eunuchs to avoid being selected. One fringe rumor claims that certain eunuchs, paid handsomely in jade pieces or rare silk, would misplace a plaque on purpose. Of course, if caught, both parties would be quietly vanished. The Forbidden City had no tolerance for love, nor fear. And yet, affection found a way. Every few decades, a tale emerges of a consort and a servant exchanging glances a little too often. Of stolen letters, wrapped in peach leaves and buried in garden pots. Of lullabies hummed too gently at night. These whispers never make it into official records, but they live on in folk plays, operas, and embroidered metaphors passed down by palace tailors. Because no matter how rigid the system, no matter how polished the scrolls, human hearts refuse to be fully scheduled. At this point, you've wandered through nearly every corridor of the emperor's romantic regime. You've peeked at the politics, the rituals, the odd tender moment folded carefully between the brocade. And you're starting to see the whole picture. This wasn't a place of pleasure. It was a place of performance. The bedroom was a throne. The silks were armor. And the women? Some were pawns. Some became queens. A few rewrote the rules entirely. Outside, a flock of pigeons scatters across the courtyard, wings catching the morning light. And somewhere deep in the palace, a new girl is preparing her first curtsy. The incense smoke curls just a little thicker tonight. Outside, the sun is setting beyond the vermilion roofs, casting long shadows across the marble balustrades and whispering bamboo. The palace is winding down, or so it seems. But behind the silken screens, you know the real story is just beginning. This is when the emperor's evening ritual begins. Not a war meeting, not a state banquet, but something more delicate, more choreographed, the choosing of the knight's companion. You're already in position, standing beside the long, low-lacquered table where the plaque ritual unfolds. Every evening, just after twilight, a eunuch approaches with a box. Inside are name plaques, small, polished tokens, each engraved with the title of an eligible consort. Think of it as Tinder, but carved in ivory and conducted under strict surveillance. The emperor selects one by hand. No dice rolls, no spinning wheels, just the silent pressure of lineage, alliances, and mood. Did a general's daughter offer witty banter at tea yesterday? Her plaque might rise. Did another consort's brother fall out of favor? She may vanish from the box altogether. Historians still debate whether the emperor had true freedom in these choices, or if the staff subtly arranged the options to suit broader political schemes. Either way, the ritual was always performed with ceremony. Once selected, the plaque is handed to a chief eunuch, who then sends a whispered chain of signals across the inner court. Slippers are polished, a hairdresser dispatched, the chosen woman informed, discreetly but firmly, that she is summoned. And just like that, the gears turn. You follow the plaque now, carried by gloved hands through winding corridors and up a narrow staircase. At the top, the cleansing chamber. This part is less romantic. The selected consort must bathe before every visit. Not a leisurely soak, mind you, but a scrub supervised by attendants, with powdered pearl water, perfumed oils, and occasionally, brace yourself, wine rinses. Yes, imperial physicians once recommended washing in rice wine to soften the spirit. Did it work? Unclear. But it certainly left the room smelling like a tipsy apothecary. After the bath, there's the hair. You watch as pins are arranged with the precision of military formations. Each accessory matters. A phoenix comb signals confidence. A lotus pin, serenity. Wearing the wrong symbol to bed could be considered deeply inappropriate. The wardrobe, of course, is already chosen. A sleeved night robe embroidered with dragons, clouds, or the subtle silhouette of plum blossoms. Everything in the forbidden bedroom you're learning speaks in code. Finally, the escort begins. Here's the part no one likes to talk about. The chosen consort doesn't walk alone. She's escorted to the emperor's chamber by a pair of eunuchs, sometimes four, depending on protocol. They carry her on a small stretcher-like platform, or gently support her arms if she's on foot. She is not allowed to touch the ground on her own.
Why?
Because the pathway to the emperor must remain symbolically unsullied. Her feet must be as pure as her intentions, or at least, that's the poetic version. The more practical reason might be slip-related injuries, but we'll never know for sure. As you trail behind, you notice how quiet the palace becomes during this procession. Even the birds seem to pause. 1,000 eyes are watching, but no one speaks. The chosen woman's expression must remain calm, demure. She is not to smile, nor glance too quickly at anyone. This is not a victory lap. It is a ritual. The emperor's bedchamber awaits. Now, this is not a modest space. We're talking brocade canopies, gold-threaded tapestries, bronze incense burners shaped like mythical beasts, and bedding so deep it probably had its own climate zone. And no, the emperor does not leap out from behind a curtain to yell, "Surprise!" Instead, he waits. He sits on a low dais, dressed in an informal robe, still ornate, but looser, more relaxed. Perhaps he's sipping tea, or sketching lazy strokes across a calligraphy scroll. Some records suggest he'd often recite poetry, especially during early spring. Romantic? Maybe. Or maybe he just liked the sound of his own voice. Once the consort arrives, she kneels. A formal greeting, a delicate pause. What happens next is never officially recorded. No scrolls describe the exact proceedings. No diagrams explain the etiquette of pillow talk. But we can infer, from scattered poems and private journals, that the tone varied, sometimes distant, sometimes tender. There are even stories of the emperor simply falling asleep while the consort whispered stories from her childhood. Imagine that. You prepare for hours, bathe in wine, pin your hair into a vertical garden of symbolism, and he snoozes before you finish your opening anecdote. Still, for some, this brief encounter could change everything. A single night of favor might result in a gift of jade bracelets, a silk robe, a private garden. For others, it led to pregnancy and a lifetime of shifting power. And occasionally, just occasionally, it led to something rarer, genuine attention. Maybe even something resembling affection. But that was dangerous ground, because the higher you rose in the emperor's favor, the more enemies you earned. A favorite consort might find herself spied upon, whispered about, even sabotaged by rivals. A misplaced shoe, a broken fan, a rumor about a dream interpreted the wrong way, any of these could send a beloved woman tumbling back into obscurity. And so, as you step back into the dark hallway outside the bedchamber, you begin to understand why some women prefer never to be chosen. Because in this world, being desired was as risky as being ignored. Outside, the moon rises above the crimson eaves. Another plaque will be chosen tomorrow. The night deepens and the palace settles into a hushed rhythm, but your journey is far from over. As the chosen consort returns from the emperor's bedroom, her world shifts again, this time to the post-visit quarters, a realm just as mysterious as the bedchamber itself. You follow silently, noting the subtle changes in air, lighting, and sound. These chambers are designed for rest, reflection, and sometimes recuperation. The consort is led to a small, private pavilion where delicate herbal teas are prepared, often a blend of chrysanthemum and jasmine, believed to soothe the body and calm the restless mind. You can almost smell the faint floral steam rising from tiny porcelain cups. Here, the consort removes her elaborate hairpins and silk robes, revealing the simplicity beneath the court's elaborate facade. The attendants help ease the tension from her muscles, massaging away aches caused by stiff silk, endless curtsies, and sometimes the weight of emotional strain. A gentle reminder that the palace cares, at least superficially, for the well-being of its delicate treasures. Historians still argue whether these rituals were truly for comfort or simply part of the performance of imperial care, a show to convince others the emperor's women were well treated, even cherished. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You notice, too, the presence of secret messages in these quiet moments. Some consorts would exchange slips of paper folded like tiny origami cranes, passing them discreetly between attendants or hiding them inside teacups. A lover's note, a warning about a rival, or a plea for assistance, each carried weight beyond words. There is one particular story of Lady Anne, a consort famed for her poetry and wit, who is said to have written an entire love letter in invisible ink on the lining of her robe. The message only appeared under moonlight, a secret only the emperor and a trusted eunuch knew. Did such clandestine communications sway palace politics?
Possibly.
Did they keep hearts beating through long, lonely nights? Absolutely. The post-visit ritual ends with a final, silent bow to the incense altar, a reminder of the sacred nature of this nocturnal dance. Then, the consort is led back to her own quarters, where sleep awaits, but often it is elusive. For many, the palace was not a place of peaceful rest, but of insomnia and whispered worries. The pressure to remain flawless, to conceive the right heir, to navigate endless intrigue, kept minds racing long after the lanterns were extinguished. The court physician's prescriptions for these restless nights included everything from powdered herbs to lullabies sung by trained singers. There was even a peculiar remedy involving the soft beating of peacock feathers against the temples, an odd but oddly soothing practice that modern science would probably classify as sensory therapy. As you leave the post-visit quarters behind, you're struck by the fragile humanity beneath the gilded surface. These women were not just ornaments or political pawns. They were individuals with fears, desires, and stories untold. Outside, a gentle breeze stirs the hanging silk lanterns, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin anew. As dawn breaks over the Forbidden City, the palace stirs with a different kind of energy. The women who spent the night in the emperor's bedchamber, whether favored or forgotten, begin their morning rituals, which are as precise and layered as the evening's ceremonies. You watch as the consorts prepare for the day ahead, their movements both graceful and practiced, like a well-rehearsed dance that the world rarely sees. One of the first tasks is the morning toilette, a process far more elaborate than a quick wash. The consorts are bathed again, this time with fragrant waters infused with ingredients like magnolia, ginger, and sometimes crushed pearls, which were believed to brighten the complexion and calm the spirit. The scent is subtle but persistent, a reminder that beauty here is as much a ritual as it is a natural state. Makeup follows, with rice powder delicately applied to smooth the skin and rouge gently brushed on the cheeks. The subtle art of makeup was less about transformation and more about maintaining a consistent, serene visage that could mask the complex emotions bubbling beneath. Think of it as the ultimate poker face, but with more petals and silk. Hairstyling this early in the day is less elaborate than at night, but no less symbolic. Certain pins and combs denote rank, mood, or even the day of the week, which, in the court's poetic system, had profound significance. A consort wearing a jade hairpin on a Wednesday, for example, was signaling readiness for a private audience, while a lotus flower might hint at a desire for quiet contemplation. You remember how the face test emphasized neutrality. This morning ritual reinforces that each consort wears a calm mask, hiding hopes, fears, and rivalries behind a painted smile. Breakfast is served quietly in small groups. The imperial kitchen prepares a variety of soft, nourishing foods: steamed buns filled with sweet bean paste, warm rice porridge, and herbal teas designed to gently awaken the senses without jarring the delicate digestion. Eating here is not a loud affair. Rather, it's meant to be calming, a way to prepare the body and mind for the day's challenges. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the palace, the consorts engage in informal networks, quiet conversations that might seem like harmless chit-chat, but often carry the weight of strategy. Who has gained favor? Which eunuch is slipping into old alliances? Who is rumored to be expecting? These social webs are intricate and ever-shifting. Some consorts wield influence, not through the emperor's favor, but through these behind-the-scenes connections. It's an unspoken truth that survival in the inner court often depended as much on allies as on affection. There's also the quieter side of mourning, letters and poetry. Some consorts send delicate notes to loved ones outside the palace, while others compose verses to impress the emperor or curry favor with powerful eunuchs. Poetry here is more than art, it's currency. Historians still debate how much genuine affection existed amid these performances. Was poetry a true outlet for emotion, or just another carefully curated layer of palace decorum? Likely it was both. As the morning progresses, you notice the shift in mood. The quiet resilience of these women is palpable. Behind every serene smile lies a story of endurance. And somewhere in the bustling kitchens, a cook hums softly as they prepare the next meal. As the sun climbs higher, the palace shifts again, this time toward more public moments in the emperor's day. Yet, the inner chambers remain a place of quiet tension and subtle drama, especially when it comes to the delicate matter of succession and favor. You're drawn now to the whispered rumors about the children born to the emperor's consorts, their futures often shaped as much by palace intrigue as by imperial decree. In the Forbidden City, an heir was not just a son, but a symbol of continuity, power, and stability. Yet, the path to becoming the emperor's chosen successor was littered with uncertainty, carefully guarded rituals, and endless competition. You learn that the mothers of these heirs occupied a precarious position. On the one hand, a consort who bore a son could rise swiftly in rank, gaining privileges and influence. On the other, she risked jealousy, sabotage, and even exile, depending on the political winds. Historians still argue about the true extent of a mother's influence over her child's destiny. Was it sheer maternal will, court alliances, or the emperor's favor alone? Whatever the truth, palace life for a consort who was pregnant or nursing was fraught with both hope and peril. Some were secluded for months, receiving special care and rare delicacies like bird's nest soup, believed to boost the health of mother and child. Yet the isolation could also deepen vulnerability. Without constant protection, a consort might fall prey to rivals who spread rumors or intercepted letters, undermining her position. You recall an anecdote about Consort May, whose quiet strength and intelligence reportedly helped secure her son's claim to the throne, despite fierce opposition. Her story remains partly legend, partly fact, illustrating how personal courage intertwined with political savvy. Meanwhile, the emperor's attention was often divided, his moods as changeable as the seasons. Some days, he would grant long audiences to his favored consort. Other days, he might withdraw completely, leaving her to navigate court alone. The palace gardens become a refuge during these times, quiet spaces where consorts could walk, talk, and exchange confidences under the watchful eyes of eunuchs. It was here that friendships blossomed, alliances formed, and sometimes even romances whispered. These gardens, filled with plum blossoms, willow trees, and koi ponds, were carefully designed to inspire tranquility. But for those living within, the beauty often belied the complexity beneath. At times, consorts would write poetry inspired by these serene landscapes, a gentle outlet for their longing and frustrations. You begin to understand how, behind the gilded facade of the Forbidden City, life was an intricate balance of power, affection, and survival. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the palace grounds, you feel the weight of centuries of secrets resting lightly on your shoulders. And somewhere, far from the bedchambers and gardens, the wheels of empire turn ever onward. As afternoon fades into early evening, the palace pulses with a different rhythm, a mix of anticipation, preparation, and quiet calculation. You find yourself drifting toward the banquet halls, where the emperor occasionally hosts lavish dinners for select guests. But while these public feasts are grand, the real stories unfold in the smaller, private dinners hosted by favored consorts. These intimate gatherings are a world apart from the spectacle of court, offering moments of warmth, laughter, and sometimes subtle political maneuvering. Imagine sitting on a plush, embroidered cushion, the scent of jasmine tea mingling with the sweet notes of candied fruits and spiced meats served on delicate porcelain plates. The conversation flows in soft whispers, punctuated by gentle laughter and the occasional clink of a jade cup. These dinners serve multiple purposes. For the consorts, they are opportunities to deepen bonds with the emperor, demonstrate culinary sophistication, or subtly showcase their cultural knowledge, an important skill in a court where refinement was power. But these gatherings also offer chances for consorts to strengthen alliances among themselves or with influential eunuchs. Trust and rivalry intermingle like the delicate flavors on their plates. Historians debate how much these social events influenced political outcomes. Some suggest that a well-placed compliment or a shared joke could sway decisions. Others argue that such moments were mere distractions from the real power plays happening behind closed doors. You overhear stories about Consort Liane, who is said to have memorized the favorite dishes of key officials, using that knowledge to secure favors and protect her own position. Culinary espionage. Perhaps? It wouldn't be the first time food became a tool in palace intrigue. After the meal, music often follows. Skilled musicians play soft melodies on the guqin or bamboo flute, their tunes weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. The consorts might join in with poetry recitations or quietly listen, eyes half closed, letting the music carry their worries away. But even amid the beauty, there is a current of tension. The emperor's presence is both a comfort and a reminder of the fragile favor upon which everything depends. Some nights he lingers, engaging in conversation or playful banter. Other nights, he withdraws quickly, leaving the consorts to retreat behind silken screens and whispered speculations. As the evening deepens, you're reminded of the delicate balance these women maintain between grace and strategy, affection and ambition. Outside, lanterns flicker softly, casting dancing shadows on the palace walls. And somewhere, a distant guqin melody fades into the night. Night deepens, and the palace settles into a hushed lull, but not before a final, subtle drama unfolds in the emperor's private study. This is where the emperor sometimes retreats to review reports, consult with advisors, or, more intriguingly, pen poetry inspired by his consorts and the delicate, sometimes tangled emotions of court life. You find yourself quietly observing as an attendant places a thin brush and inkstone near a low table. The emperor's calligraphy is said to be elegant but restrained, much like his demeanor, a perfect balance of strength and subtlety. The act of writing poetry was more than a pastime. It was a way to express feelings deemed inappropriate for public display. His verses often hint at longing, regret, or fleeting joy, emotions that rarely found their way into official decrees or histories. Historians still argue whether these poems were genuine reflections or carefully crafted political statements. Either way, they reveal a more human side to a figure often shrouded in imperial mystique. You recall a famous poem supposedly inspired by a consort who was particularly skilled in playing the pipa. It spoke of moonlit nights and whispered secrets, the strings of the instrument echoing the unspoken words between them. In these quiet moments, the emperor's world feels less like a throne room and more like a fragile bubble suspended between duty and desire. The study itself is filled with small treasures, carved jade figurines, delicate porcelain vases, and stacks of scrolls that hold the weight of empire and art alike. You notice a small, folded piece of paper tucked inside a book of Confucian classics, a secret note from a consort, no doubt, hinting at a meeting in the gardens or a simple expression of affection. Such notes, though brief, carried immense significance, a lifeline connecting isolated hearts within the palace walls. As the emperor dips his brush into ink, you imagine the thoughts behind each stroke, plans, regrets, hopes for the future. Outside, the palace courtyard is bathed in moonlight, the quiet rustle of bamboo, leaves the only sound. This fleeting glimpse into the emperor's private world leaves you with a sense of both intimacy and distance, an enigma wrapped in silk and shadow. And as you step away from the study, you feel the soft pull of sleep calling you, much like the palace itself begins to drift into dreams. As the night deepens further, you wander back through the shadowed corridors toward the emperor's harem quarters, where the consorts settle in for their final rest, or so they hope. Here, the atmosphere is softer, yet still tinged with a lingering tension. You sense that even as the palace sleeps, the undercurrents of rivalry and longing pulse quietly beneath the surface. The women prepare their sleeping mats carefully, smoothing silk sheets and fluffing embroidered pillows. Some clutch small charms or amulets, objects believed to ward off bad dreams or invite peaceful slumber. You notice that many consorts carry with them handheld fans decorated with intricate designs, often featuring mythological creatures or auspicious symbols. These fans served a dual purpose: practical cooling in the heavy palace heat, and as discreet signals in the subtle language of court flirtation. There's a gentle intimacy in these moments, a shared understanding of vulnerability and resilience. Whispered stories circulate about the best sleep aids in the palace. Some swear by lavender-scented pillows, others favor the calming sound of water trickling from jade fountains. Historians still argue about how much the consort's nightly rest was truly restful. The pressure to maintain perfect appearance and constant readiness often led to bouts of insomnia or restless dreams. One intriguing tale tells of Consort Hua, who supposedly invented a lullaby that became a favorite among the palace children. Her song, soft and melodic, was said to ease even the most troubled minds into peaceful sleep. Whether fact or legend, the idea of music as a healing force resonates deeply. You also recall the curious practice of placing rose petals under pillows, thought to invite sweet dreams and perhaps, just perhaps, a visit from the emperor in the night. Despite the comforts and rituals, the consort's sleep was often interrupted by the demands of the day ahead: early morning audiences, rigorous beauty routines, and the ever-present need to navigate palace politics. But for now, as you watch the silk curtains sway gently in the evening breeze, you feel the slow descent into quiet and rest. The palace exhales, and the stories you've followed soften into whispers. Outside, the moonlight glints off lacquered roofs, casting serene patterns on the stone paths. You, too, might begin to drift, carried gently by the weight of history and the softness of night. In the stillness of night, you find yourself drawn to the lesser-known corners of the Forbidden City, quiet spaces where palace staff and attendants quietly carry out their duties, unseen but essential to the smooth flow of life within these walls. The eunuchs, in particular, play a pivotal role not only in guarding the emperor's privacy, but also in managing the delicate social balance of the inner court. You observe a group of eunuchs preparing the chambers for the next day, carefully arranging incense burners, replenishing silk cushions, and making sure every detail is in place. These men were often former servants or captives, chosen and trained from youth to serve with loyalty and discretion. Their presence was a paradox, both powerful and invisible. Historians still debate the true extent of eunuchs' influence. Some argue they were mere functionaries, while others point to evidence of significant political power, sometimes rivaling that of ministers. You catch whispers of how certain eunuchs cultivated intimate relationships with favored consorts, becoming confidants or advisors, their opinions shaping decisions behind the scenes. One eunuch named Wei was reputed to have mediated disputes between consorts, using a combination of charm and careful diplomacy to maintain peace. His story, though fragmentary, hints at the complexities of palace life beyond the emperor's gaze. The attendants, meanwhile, move silently like shadows, their footsteps muffled on the polished stone floors. Their knowledge of the palace's hidden passages and secret doors is unmatched, enabling discreet movement and communication. You imagine the labyrinthine network of corridors and stairways, designed to protect the emperor's privacy and security, but also fostering intrigue and secrecy. In the dim light, you glimpse folded letters, carefully hidden gifts, and sometimes tiny tokens of affection exchanged in the dead of night. These moments reveal a world rarely seen, a world where loyalty, ambition, and humanity intertwine in unexpected ways. And as the first hint of dawn tints the eastern sky, you realize that the palace, though silent, is never truly at rest. You prepare to follow its stories once more, knowing that history's whispers continue to echo in every corner. As dawn creeps over the horizon, the Forbidden City begins to stir once again, its grand halls and hidden chambers awakening to a new day filled with promise and uncertainty. You linger in the Emperor's private bedroom one last time, the space where so many moments of tenderness, strategy, and quiet tension have unfolded. It is a room steeped in history, layered with the hopes and fears of those who inhabited it. The silk curtains flutter gently in the morning breeze, and the soft light reveals the intricate details of carved wooden screens and delicate porcelain vases, silent witnesses to centuries of intimate stories. In these final hours, you reflect on the many lives intertwined here: the emperor, his consorts, the eunuchs, and countless others who shaped the rhythms of palace life. Historians still argue about how much of the drama inside these walls was dictated by duty versus desire, and where the line between public and private truly lay. You consider the emperor's place in history, not just as a ruler, but as a man navigating the complex tapestry of love, power, and tradition. As you prepare to leave the Forbidden City behind, the echoes of whispered secrets and soft laughter linger in the air. The palace stands silent now, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. And you, having traveled through this quiet world of silks and shadows, can finally let your own thoughts drift into peaceful rest. Word count 1059. Wind down. Now, as you settle deeper into your own space, imagine the delicate rustle of silk and the soft glow of lantern light fading gently into the distance. The palace, with all its secrets and stories, slips quietly into a dreamlike calm. There is a comforting rhythm here, a slow, measured breath that soothes and reassures. You might feel the warmth of the morning sun, even if your eyes remain closed, and the faint, sweet scent of jasmine drifting on a gentle breeze. Let your mind wander softly through those serene gardens, the peaceful courtyards, and the quiet corridors, each one a tender echo of lives lived long ago. No need to rush, no urgency, just the gentle unfolding of night and today, and the soothing promise of rest. Sleep now, carried on whispers of history and the soft embrace of stories told in the quiet hours. Sweet dreams.